Better to die fighting for freedom than be a prisoner all the days of your life. Bob Marley said that. You say you want a revolution, well, all right. It just so happens that I've got 4 revolutionaries who died today in history. She was meritorious and dutiful, his peaceful resistance, beautiful. Her social causes were vast, but his contributions, will they last? Let's go. On this day, in 1836, Betsy Ross, the American seamstress, who is widely credited with making the American flag, died of natural causes at the age of 84. Did Betsy Ross create the American flag, though? Betsy's creation of the flag is not an established historical fact like the signing of the Declaration of Independence or Washington's winter at Valley Forge. Those events quite definitely took place and were public knowledge from the beginning. There was an affidavit, however, by Betsy's daughter, Rachel Fletcher, in which she implied that Betsy had a significant hand in the design of the flag. Supposedly, the original flag was a square, which Betsy insisted was the wrong proportion. In addition to that, the stars, 13 at the time, were scattered all over the blue field in the upper left corner of the flag. Betsy insisted that they be arranged in some sort of geometry and suggested a circle, to be more specific. Also, the stars were supposedly 6-pointed stars in the beginning, hail Satan, which Betsy suggested should be 5-pointed stars. I guess she got her way in the end. Betsy Ross worked much of her life as a seamstress, which was probably why she got the job. Her skill set got her pretty close to the front lines of the Revolutionary War. She repaired uniforms and made tents and blankets for soldiers, and even helped assemble stuffed paper tube cartridges with musket balls for prepared package ammunition for the Continental Army. Betsy Ross died in her home amidst the bustle of Philadelphia. Her home is actually a tourist destination, but like the creation of the flag, nobody knows if it was actually her real home. Her body was first interred at the Free Quaker Burial Grounds on North 5th Street in Philadelphia. 20 years later, her remains were moved to the Mount Moriah Cemetery, also in Philadelphia. In preparation for the American bicentennial, the city ordered the remains be moved to the courtyard of the now legendary Betsy Ross House in 1975. However, cemetery workers found no remains beneath her tombstone. Bones found elsewhere in the family plot were deemed to be hers and were reinterred in the current grave visited by tourists at the supposed Betsy Ross house. On this day, in 1948, Mahatma Gandhi, India's political and spiritual leader, was assassinated in New Delhi by Hindu extremists at the age of 78. Gandhi was the preeminent leader of the Indian independence movement in British-ruled India, employing non-violent civil disobedience. Gandhi led India to independence and inspired movements for civil rights and freedom across the world. Gandhi famously led Indians in challenging the British-imposed salt tax with the 250-mile Dandi Salt March in 1930, and later in calling for the British to quit India in 1942. He was imprisoned for many years upon many occasions in both South Africa and India. Gandhi attempted to practice non-violence and truth in all situations and advocated that others do the same. He lived modestly in a self-sufficient residential community and wore the traditional Indian dhoti and shawl, woven with yarn hand-spun on a charkha. He ate simple vegetarian food and also undertook long fasts as a means of both self-purification and social protest. So on this day in 1948, at 5:17 p.m., Gandhi was with his grandnieces in a public garden when Nathuram Godse fired 3 bullets from a Beretta 9mm pistol into his chest at point-blank range. Godse was a Hindu nationalist with links to the extremist Hindu Mahasabha, who held Gandhi guilty of favoring Pakistan and strongly opposed the doctrine of nonviolence. By Hindu tradition, Gandhi's ashes were to be spread on a river, but instead they were poured into urns which were seen across India for memorial services. And, believe it or not, on this day in 2006, Coretta Scott King, American activist and wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., died of ovarian cancer. She was also 78, like Gandhi, at the time of her death. Coretta Scott King was a longtime advocate for world peace, and author Michael Eric Dyson has called her an earlier and more devoted pacifist than her husband, although Mrs. King would object to the term pacifism. Instead, she believed herself to be an advocate of nonviolent, direct action to achieve social change. In 1957, Mrs. King was one of the founders of the Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy, now called Peace Action, and she spoke in San Francisco on the same day that her husband spoke in New York during the major anti-Vietnam War march of April 15th in 1967. She also championed LGBTQ rights in a number of ways. Coretta Scott King was an early supporter in the struggle for lesbian and gay civil rights. In August of 1983 in Washington, D.C., she urged the amendment of the Civil Rights Act to include gays and lesbians as a protected class. She may have received criticism for her role in LGBTQ justice causes, as suggested by one quote. "I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, but I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, 'Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.' I appeal to everyone who believes in Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream to make room at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood for lesbian and gay people." On January 14th, 2006, Coretta made her last public appearance in Atlanta at a dinner honoring her husband's memory. On January 26th of 2006, King checked into a rehabilitation center in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, under a different name. Doctors did not learn her real identity until her medical records arrived the next day and did not begin treatment due to her condition. Coretta Scott King died late in the evening on January 30th, 2006 at the Rehabilitation Center in Rosarito. The hospital was called the Oasis Hospital, and she was there undergoing holistic therapy for her stroke and advanced stage ovarian cancer. The main cause of her death is believed to be respiratory failure due to complications from ovarian cancer. Her remains were transported to Georgia, where she had a grand and celebratory funeral. In attendance were all living presidents and their wives, except for Barbara Bush for some reason. Senator and soon-to-be President Barack Obama was in attendance as well. And on this day in 2015, Karl Djerassi, the Austrian-born American chemist and father of the contraceptive pill, died at the age of 91 from complications of liver and bone cancer. Djerassi was a Jewish refugee who fled to America from World War II-torn Austria. One incredible story from his early days in America is that he and his mother were conned out of their last $20 by a swindling New York cab driver. Djerassi wrote Eleanor Roosevelt about his tragedy, and in return, she offered him a college scholarship. From a New York Times article upon his death, Dr. Djerassi wrote books, plays, and 1,200 scientific articles taught at universities for 5 decades, created an artist colony in California, and obtained a patent on the first antihistamine. His work on the science of birth control helped engender enormous controversies and social changes, altering sexual and reproductive practices, family economics, and the working lives of millions of women around the world. And on this day, in the year 2017, 5 on 20 segment, Sean Sees Dead People died to death from too much death. As I have not worried to be born, I do not worry to die, nor am I afraid to kill this segment. And from every death emerges new life. Join me next week as I unveil my new segment. Thanks.